Welcome back to Mosaic Arts Online panel discussion follow-up, where the topic is color. So we got a lot of questions that came in from our chat, and we felt this was the best way to follow up and give all of you these answers. And since they will be here at our YouTube channel, you can visit them at any time and see these wonderful artists share more of their perspective on the things that you were asking. So each of the artists will be asked half a dozen questions or so, and they will answer your questions now. So we're going to start with Carol. And Carol, one of the first questions that came in was clarification, mosaic over painting. So can you share a little bit more about that process you do?
Yeah, basically it's a process that I developed in creating my artwork. That's not necessarily how I've been teaching mosaic for the past 15 years, up until last year. I recorded a video on Mosaic Arts Online on Impressionism in Mosaic. And the process is basically that you have your board, you paint on your board, and I give step-by-step instructions, and then you place your glass on your paint. But you're changing it around as you work. You're not being absolutely specific about the green paint and the green glass, because we also introduced at that time value and gradation.
Great. And when you wait for the paint to dry before you do any of the adhering of the stained glass, correct?
Yeah, it dries pretty quickly. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, your next question is, does the paper stay or is it a reverse method?
I think what happened is that somebody got confused about painting. Do we paint on paper? Do we paint and then reverse the paper around? So we're going to forget all about that. And basically what we do is we paint on our board. And that's where your line drawing, so to speak, or your cartoon, whatever you want to call it, is placed, so we know exactly where to place the glass. Always, of course, leaving room for change.
Good answer. And so kind of transitioning into that same process in your Impressionism course is, how do you blend the colors using the glass?
Right. That's actually a really good question. That also has to do with the color wheel and understanding value. And it's a pretty long explanation. And the basics is that if I get my color wheel, my trusty color wheel, again, I will take, if we're using, let's say, a green tree, we'll start out with the greens of the glass that you want to use. And then if it's supposed to be shaded, then I'll take a blue that is the same value or the same shade of color, different color, and put the blue and the green together. So the green is brighter, the blue is darker, the green will pop out, and the blue will recede as if it's a shadow.
It's a good answer. And you do cover that in more detail in your course, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was in the realism class as well as the impressionistic class.
Yeah, I think you're right. All right, one quick other one. Well, we have a couple more, but can you revisit the squint process?
Yeah, making art is, and no matter what material you use, no matter what medium you use, no matter what size you're working with, you come to a point in your work where you have to critique your own work. Sometimes people work in a community, but mostly artists work by themselves. So you have to learn how to critique your own work. And there's, so many things that you can do, but the most important thing that you can do is squint, because it eliminates detail and you see values and you see highlights. So that's just one of the techniques that I use with my students. and with myself all the time, is to squint. Everybody has the tool. It's free. So you can just squint. If you don't know how to squint, or if you can't squint, take off your glasses, of course. And then, it's the same thing.
Right.
But squint at your work as much as possible to eliminate detail and be able to see the values and the colors that you're using.
And it becomes a habit. At least it has for me. So I think it's a good tool to always use. All right, the next one. Can you give examples of using the color wheel to evoke emotions?
Yeah, I mean, if you go into a gallery and you see a big red painting, it usually evokes a lot of energy or danger, passion. If you go into a hospital, usually hospitals are green or blue because it has to do with life. Green promotes life, blue promotes peace. So different colors on the color wheel definitely have an expression. Even if you look at my work behind me, I don't know if you can see this one here, right here. That's a mosaic that I made of my granddaughter Lola. And it has a lot of blues and oranges that really fight each other on the color wheel. And they're called complementary colors. And they don't work together unless you want something powerful. And then again, if you look at Erin's work, Erin happens to use a lot of bright colors, all the colors in the rainbow, and it's very vibrant and very happy and very fresh. So different artists happen to use different colors in different ways. Her work is very contemporary and modern and fresh, and mine is the same, but more on the lines of realism. But there's a whole psychology behind the use of different colors on the color wheel. And actually, if you just Google emotions in color, you can find it on the internet.
Thank you. All right, 2 more questions. How do you find out if you have extra cones or less? Do you need to see an ophthalmologist?
Yeah. Well, you probably do have to see an optometrist or ophthalmologist to really be clear on how many cones you have in your eye, and that predicts how much color you see. Usually people see about 25 to 27 different shades of colors, but it has to do with how much light gets in, and how many cones you have. I mean, cones are also cells in your eyes, and you have millions of cells, but to categorize it, they go from 1 to 4. And the test really should be done with a doctor.
A doctor, well, that makes sense, but it's good to know. I think it's all good knowledge. And then your last question, can you address using the grayscale?
Yeah, how do you use the grayscale? Well, I have 2 pieces of glass here, both green. One is light, one is dark. Basically, the grayscale, for those of you that don't know what the grayscale is, it's value or shade with no color in it from white to black. Usually there are 10 to 12 different shades on a basic value scale. When I was in art school, we had probably about 50 to 75 that we had little cards, and we had to put them in value order, which was really, 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 really hard because there was such a light, slight difference between each card. But in art, we use a simple 10, and we can actually fill it in to make it 12 or 14 different values or shades of color. And what you do is on your color wheel, on the front side of this particular color wheel, you'll see shades of value of white, and then it goes all the way around here to black, and this one actually has 10 different shades. And if you're confused with what shade to use and what will work, or if it is a darker shade, you can take your glass and put it next to the grayscale to see where it fits. And this one happens to fit at value number 4. But remember that you're using paper and glass. It's 2 different mediums, so it's not exactly correct. It's sort of the right shade. And then I'll take the lighter green, and I'll put that over here to the lighter values, and maybe
that up a little higher.
Oh, sorry. And then I'll put that to number 6. And can you see it's almost the same right there?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I use it, because oftentimes you don't know if something, you don't know if your glass is too light or too dark. And if you're using a particular background, you really want your foreground to pop, or you want the color glass next to it to really be subtle. So going from light values to dark values, if you want something subtle, you'll compare it to number 3 and 4. If you want something more drastic, 3 and 4. If you want it more subtle, and if you want something more drastic, you'll put your glass next to 9 and 2. So there's more of a shade difference or value difference in your glass. So basically, you're working with monochromatic colors,
right?
Which you'll actually eliminate the colors and you just use black and white.
Right. And you do cover that in all of your courses. I know you cover that in composition and your realism, your impressionism, and your portraiture. So I think it's really important for a lot of people that do work in stained glass. That is one of the biggest things you cover, is how to take stained glass and use the grayscale to really make it work.
Well, all art is about value. All art. I mean, without value, you can't see art.
Yeah.
So, yeah, value is something that you train yourself with. It doesn't always happen automatically. It takes a lot of time. I worked with value for years and years before I really understood it. And it really just takes a lot of time and commitment to do that. And I mentioned in the video before that if you find those 2 apps, and I'm sure there's more, I love Hue, H-U-E, and also, what's the other one? I forgot.
Blend something?
Blendoko. Like Sudoku, but Blendoku. Yeah. Blendoku.
Right.
If you find that one also, just practice. I play with them all the time. I'm learning every day. So do that.
Okay, thank you so much for your answers. And next I wanted to talk about Erin's questions. And so thank you, Erin, for coming back to answer these questions. And your first one is, how does one paint with mortar?
Okay, so I realized I was talking about my process, and people might not really know my work and what I do, but I do literally paint with mortar. So I'm mixing, when I'm doing my substrate, I am mixing all my colors that I need, and I'm painting it and doing my substrate all at once. So I'm literally mixing pots of paint that are mortar or Thinset, depending on where you are. Or in Australia, some cement adhesive, I think they call it. So I think that simply answers the question, other than I get into all the logistics in my courses, because there are a lot of things to think of. It's not just like paint. There's a lot more to take into consideration.
And and how you do it on the substrate before you even add anything, that can become a piece of art by itself. So
I use layers and scratching and
it's a very cool technique. Okay, your second question is it more of a challenge to combine bright rather than muted colors?
So everybody's different. Everybody's tastes and color palette likes they're different. I of course like the bright colors and the I like vibrant colors. So I don't use shades. So mine are all tints or like vibrant pure colors, because they also go together that way, right? There's a for me, they go together. Everybody's different. Wacky combinations are great too. And then muted colors. I think, yeah, this one's hard for me because I think it's easier to do the bright ones, but I don't think most people would find that as easy. Annabella.
We all don't think it would be that easy. So it's a good question, but it's, again, I think it goes back to the practice thing. You got to just try and see what feels good.
Yeah, I think muted are probably easier because the power, they're more subtle, and that's easy. It's not as intimidating to work with. But if you're not intimidated by color, then go for it and try the more vibrant colors. Actually, I'm pretty cruel in some of my workshops that I've taught with Kelly Knickerbocker too, in the long format, like the live. I get mean, and we're like, mix 3 colors or mix a color you love, and now pass it to the right.
Yeah.
That you're working with a color that is, it's hard for you. This isn't the one you love. You're working with the one that the person next to you loves. So I think that's once you get more comfortable, if you're more comfortable with muted colors, practice that way and then start challenging yourself.
And if you take her online course, you can do the same thing with your imaginary friend to the right.
You would never use and then try and figure out a way to use it.
Exactly. All right.
I want to add a little thing because there's
always
a compensation. There's always something, any color, you could put another color with it or another color, and it's not just that one color. They're acting together. So it's practicing that reaction.
I love it. And a lot of it's intuitive, what feels good.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, can you use Thinset tinted on wood substrates, or is there a similar alternative?
Okay, so this is kind of like the weld bond thing. Some people like using weld bond, some people don't. I'm a Thinset / mortar lover, and I also don't use wood. But a lot of people do use wood. I make my own substrates out of mortar and mesh. And I teach people how to do that in my substrates workshop, or something like weedy or wetty board. It's a cementitious material on styrofoam, rigid styrofoam, and those substrates are never going to change. That's the thing, that it's like cement board in a bath, although those can degrade too. But I'm digressing. You want to work on a substrate that's not going to expand and contract, because then your tesserae are going to adhere properly and stay. If your substrate's moving, those tiles will pop off. So, and I'm selling my art, for lots of money, and I need to know that things are going to last. And I also do public art. So I'm very, very aware of materials and how long they last. And in my climate here up in Edmonton, we have to be very, very careful. So I do a lot of exterior work. So I'm always thinking about that. If this was to go outside, would it last? So that's sort of my rant about what to work on.
I agree. All right, your next one. When doing a piece where you are coloring mortar, do you have an idea of your overall color flow and work on one small area at a time, or do you have several colors mixed at once? I know the answer.
Yes, shameless plug. But yes, I mix many colors, and I'm working on the whole substrate. So the larger pieces that I've done, they have been, that layer that you see has been done in one day. in one sitting because you're working with the mortars wet. You can go back in and work some more, but I'm not working a little bit and like painting with a paintbrush. Now I'm using my whole body, and it's much more involved than just no, I shouldn't say much more involved. It's more physically involved than just painting a little bit and a little bit and a little bit.
But for you, it's kind of like the inventory of people that work like Carol and Anabella of chopping. I mean, you do all the chopping for your pieces as well, but you have the inventory of so many different mixed mortars in small little dishes at one time out just to have that as a painter would on a palette.
Yes, yes. I have lots of baggies of color that I dip into, and I mix them just like paint.
Right.
Colors that I want.
And so then the next question is pretty simple. What is an example of mortar you use? I'm guessing a brand.
Yeah. So I have access to Laticrete really easily here in.
And what number do you like?
So I like Laticrete 253. It's gold. I get a really nice smooth consistency for the work that I do. But then their MAPE is really, really good too.
Which one?
Polymer modified. There's so many in the MAPE. I'm not as familiar with them, but I would just warn, don't get any of them that say for clear glass or glass. They often have the added white in them. And that's really good if all you want is the white background. But if you're mixing mortars, it's basically white tint in there, and you won't be able to get as vibrant colors. You're making a tint, like you're adding white to your color. I do add a lot of white to my mortar for the colors that I want that to be in.
Right.
I don't want a bag of that. So just be aware if it says like super white or whatever. But MAPE and Laticrete are really good brands. There's lots of different types. And in my course I talk about picking one and have access to and sticking with one because you get to know it. So.
And I know that MAPE you can get online. Laticrete you can't, but you can order the MAPE like P10. Say it, Anabella. Say it. That one. It won't come out. I just will mess it up every time. It doesn't matter. If no one's on camera right now, I could say it, but on camera, I can't say it.
Yeah, in the States, it's actually found in some stores.
Yeah.
Floor and Decor is a chain that is, I think, all over the United States. And I was so happy to find they have it all the time.
But for now, while we're all living we're indoors, I know that I can order it and have it for working. From Amazon. So that's just a little extra tip. Okay, are you good, Erin? Do you
ask Anabella because this is important. Is that the one that you have the additive? You've got the mortar and the additive?
You can use the additive. It is recommended that it is used for outdoor use. I use the additive all the time because it does give it more strength. It's got polymers in there. But I sometimes have used it with water and it's fine. And the only thing to add there is to make sure that there's no salt in your water, because then you have issues with fluorescence and all that. But yeah.
And the additive is called Carapply.
Carapply, yeah.
K-E-R-A ply. Yeah.
The work that I do, I don't like working that way because it changes the color that I'm trying to make, and I can't see the color until it dries. So for me, I don't use that because I get a pure color with a more accurate color when it's wet.
It makes it. Erin and I were together working in the same space, and she was making her beautiful colors, and I was not making bright colors. But were you using water then?
No, I had to use. This was one of the Italy symposiums. No, I had to use and that's where I realized, this access is really hard. That's part of those symposiums is you get what you get. You don't get
and you learn. That's another experimenting, learning experience, which I think is fantastic, even though your work turned out beautiful.
Yeah. So. No, it's just I was able to do that because I know my mortars and my colors so well. I was able to start figuring it out. I didn't freak out or anything. It was just, okay, this is the way it is. This is the way I'm gonna work. Okay.
Good. And your last question is what products, brands do you use for your colorant tints?
Okay, so I order, I know where to get them. Annabelle is laughing. But you can get the tints. So I use powders for the tints and I use liquid for the tints. The liquid I get through Tami. I love
Through Mosaic Arts Online.
Mosaic Arts Online. And they're great. And then the powders I get,
you get them through your kit with us because you did build the whole kit with us. Yeah.
Yes, we will. We will promote the kit. So if you're having a hard time deciding about getting one of my courses because you're worried about finding the supplies, Tami has put together a kit so that you can do my course, and it's all you can purchase. If you purchase the class, you can purchase the kit. Correct? Is that how that works, Tami?
You can get, you can find the kit through the course, and then we also have a way to purchase without having to get the course, but it is all designed based on your color choices. And you can also go through Sherry Warner Hunter, who has a variety that is not just your choices. She has way more to choose from. So either way, people can get their tints.
Yes, yes. I want to plug your plug your effort in putting together that kit.
Well, yeah, it's great that if someone really wants to just do exactly what you're doing, then they can just get the one and done sort of thing. But if you want specific colors we don't carry, then Sherry Warner Hunter does have those available. So thank you very much. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
We were talking the other day after, talking after debriefing. And I would like to just add that we talked a lot about practice. We talked a lot about our process and stuff. But what wasn't necessarily talked about was how hard it is. So I just wanted to add that this is not easy. Art is not easy. It requires some pain, that all of us have gone through this, and where we're at now at understanding color is because we've had some real fails. I was going to say something else. So just expect that it's going to be hard, like that this isn't going to be easy. Do courses, especially ours. Read the books, take workshops, and all of those fails, take them, as a notch. You earned a notch, because you're going to learn from that.
Yeah, that's the truth. Thank you. Okay, so Annabella, your questions are, how does color relationship work with color and on Demento? Are they both so important? Of course.
I mean, I get lost without Demento, so there's that. But yes, there is a direct relationship. If you're working on gradations, it's sort of very straightforward because we're making lines, and the gradation would follow that. If you're working on sculptural forms or three-dimensional forms, then you have to consider the valleys and the high points, and consider where your light source is either really or imaginatively coming from. So I go into a bunch of that in my course. I guess in all of them, because the Andamento courses cover some of that. But to incorporate some of the more sort of advanced color theory about contrasting colors right next to each other within a line, it is possible. It produces a different sort of a feel. This is not a mosaic, it's just my color charts. So, but that is, a full gradation of a color. I do this all the time when I'm trying to work stuff out. So right there is a line. I mean, this is uncut, just the tessera, the material, the way it comes. But to do sort of the more, the color theory that's coming out of the school in Spilimbergo, where the contrasting colors are working towards an end, additive color. Giulio Menosi really is the best example of that. He has all of those lines and curves and beautiful shapes, but he does actually stick pretty faithfully to proper andamento, or to strict andamento. And he is mixing the colors as he goes. It produces very colorful work. Yeah.
Right. So this next question, just add a quick little tidbit to it, because I know it's already been covered a lot, but Anabella's MAO color theory course, could you expand on additive color techniques in Mosaic, specifically any tidbits from Stefano Jou's book, The Use of Color in Mosaic?
So Maestro Jus is a professor at the Scuola Mosaicista di Spilimbergo. It is a color theory book at heart. It is, to my knowledge, the only one that specifically addresses Mosaic. But the first half of the book is just color theory. The first third of it is color theory without ever mentioning Mosaic or Mosaic materials. And then the last sort of, I have the book in front of me, the last sort of half of it is all of these color studies that you see when you go to the school in Spilimbergo. It is, I did explain all of the theory in my course. It's all in there. I just didn't do as many of the exercises or the samples with Mosaic material, but it is all there. He explains additive color at the very beginning, and I sort of explained what it is through the process of all of my exercises, and then kind of brought it together at the end, because what it is not as important to me anyway as what the colors are doing. The interaction of color is more important. Understanding light is more important. So that is all really it is. There are more samples there that you can look at and maybe see more clearly how to lighten a tone by introducing, you know, the lighter tones in the range, or by introducing white and black. But the theory is pretty much all the same.
Yeah. All right. Cutting stone without hammer and hardy to use textures of found objects in mixed media.
Well, if you have soft stones and they're small enough, you can cut them with nippers. I would be very gentle when you first start out. Probably use nippers that you don't intend to use with glass anymore, but that's sort of the same with a hammer. Get a hammer, learn how to use a hammer and hardy. Your wrists will thank you in the long term. Every single one of the Italian masters I've ever studied with always brings up the same thing. The old timers that have been doing this for 50 years are fine when they use hammer and hardy. People that have been using nippers for a couple of years are hurting.
Yeah, there's a lot to learn, but it is great to have a hammer and hardy, especially if you're going to try, and as all of us know, use the thicker material that is harder. So yeah, and in your other course, you know, your classical ondimento and modern mosaics is probably hands down one of the best footages I've ever seen. Not to, you know, toot my own filming horn, but it is probably one of the best footages on how to use a hammer and a hardy properly with the right ergonomics and posture and everything that you can watch over and over again, just because if you learn it once with a live class, to see Anabella do it and have it there for you to learn is, to me, it's priceless. And I've learned a lot just filming and seeing how Anabella works. So I totally agree with everyone should have one, even if it's not their main tool of use. All right, so Anabella, can you talk about combining your marble tones?
Sure. It's all the same. It's the same color theory. It's a little more subtle. I was laughing when Erin was talking about subtle tones, because it is not particularly harder for me. It's not easier either. The theory is still the same. You're generally dealing with opaque tones. There's not as much reflection from stone. So that's one less element that you have to deal with if you're dealing with stone rather than smalty. But when I mix, I'm guessing whoever asked the question has probably seen this piece is notoriously bad to photograph. But that's probably where I mix most of the stone colors. That is all stone until you get all the way to the very top here. And the mixing of the colors there is not a perfect gradation going from one to another, but it's rather mixing of colors, which I go into in detail in my courses. So introducing a color in smaller pieces before you switch to that color kind of thing. But it's all the same sort of principles, you know, in that particular piece, sort of kind of reflecting on what Carol was talking about. I didn't do it on purpose. This is just how I was thinking and how I see color, but it kind of follows the color wheel around. It goes from red to blue all the way through the yellows and the greens and all that. That's right.
All right. What is the best place to learn the color theory? Learn the rules and then you can break them. Well, we only want answers for that. Exactly.
You know, color theory is color theory. It doesn't matter what it's applied to, what medium it's applied to. It is always the same. Any course on that will work. There are some considerations that we have to take into account in Mosaic because we have a three-dimensional object that has a space and a shadow in there that we need to think about. But it's all the same. You know, if you're painting, that's a valid way to learn about color theory and understand it.
Yeah, and your course.
And
what is the
but you know, somebody else before said go to museums, look at art.
Yeah.
It's all there, and it just, you know, it's sort of a passive way of getting it in there, and then when you're doing it, it's, you don't have to think about it, you just do it.
That's right. That's right. Anytime that you can be exposed to any kind of art. And it's kind of the same with Mosaic too. If you stop looking at Mosaic or drawing as what it is and start looking at shapes, that's where it all starts, is a shape, and the shape becomes something. So start breaking it down and stop labeling it and just absorb it for what it is can really help, I think.
Yeah.
All right. Your question, what is the best way to start a quote library of color smalty? You kind of covered it with the mixes.
We're all hoarders, right? I think Carol probably hoards vast amounts of stained glass, and Erin and I probably hoard vast amounts of everything that has a color in it. The mixes that some of the vendors sell are great. They a great starter. You get a bunch of different colors. I don't know that they're always the same, that they're consistent. Like if you buy it now and you buy the same sort of mix 2 years from now, it's probably going to be a little bit different. The foundries sometimes produce consistent colors. Sometimes they change a lot. In particular, the Mexican smalty is, I can tell you the story of this one orange that I got this once, and I've ordered the same number 8 times. It's never been the same.
Oh yeah.
But there are some, when I find old smalty, I grab it. It's almost unimportant how expensive or not it might be if I can afford it, because it has a different quality and it has to do with the amount of lead that they were able to use. So it's reflective in different ways. So I may have a color and its neighbor, it may be the same color, but it looks different depending on what kind of glass it is. So the Mexican will be different than the smalty from Orsoni and from Dona and on and on. So, you know, I mean, I would start with obviously the colors that you prefer to work with, but be open to getting some others that will work with that color. The other thing is, at Orsoni specifically, you can get, they call it roti because it's the pieces that are not perfect, or whatever's left over from colors that are not in the regular library that they may be made for a specific purpose. And that's a great sort of cheap way to get a lot of color that you can play with.
But it'll be all a variety of colors in one. It's going to be a complete mixture.
It is literally whatever they have their bin, because it's
but it's fun to sometimes dive into something like that.
Yeah, sometimes there are colors there that you've never seen and will never see again because it was a special color for a project and that's the leftovers.
Yeah. So those were all our questions that came in the chat while we were doing our panel. And I have 3 more questions that we didn't get to address that had come through our submissions. And one is for each of you. So Carol, if you can really quickly tell me color transitions, how to move from one color to another, gradual or abrupt manners, and the color that work well together, including in surprising ways. You have 2 seconds.
Again, that has to do with understanding value, understanding color. And in all of our workshops, we address that. I mean, it really has to do with practice, what you like, your vision, what you want to create. So we all address that in our 3 workshops. And I can only encourage people to take workshops and make art, because that's really the best way to learn.
Yeah, it really is a great investment. And again, as we know with the online courses, it's something that you have to watch over and over again. So I have one more question for Erin. When you're using Thinset and going groutless, and a big factor is color, is the color of your Thinset in the finished piece? How is it a big factor?
How everything.
It's everything.
Yeah, it's again, I addressed it in the course, but it's the color and it's the contrast, and it's how it's the interaction of those colors. So I'm paying attention to that all the time, and yeah, it's paying attention and knowing that impact that has an impact. I'm not ignoring that is honored and that's watched and it's paid attention to highly, because all of the different layers are interacting.
It's true.
Oh,
what? Yeah, no, you totally did. And Annabella, I like this one because I think it's really important that if someone's not using black grout, but they have a black substrate, how do you make colors pop? I'm thinking black grout and using complementary colors, what else works? And I think it's more important to explain how the black, what it does, but also on a black substrate.
So black is absorbing color. So black does make color pop. If you have a very bright color, it's going to look, it's not that it looks brighter, because it actually looks darker. You have to use a brighter shade than what you think you need to have it be that color. But there's very high contrast. So that's why we tend to say that it pops.
Right.
As Carol was saying earlier, a green and a blue next to each other will also pop. But some of it has to do with the dimensions of the pieces and how much color there is, and a number of factors. To get the truest color, like if I want this to look this color exactly, when I use it, the best thing to do is have gray, a neutral gray Thinset background. So there's a lot to it. But it is all about how the colors are interacting with each other.
Right. And I think, go on.
I don't know if we skipped a question, but I was ready for a question that I didn't hear.
Okay. The book, color theory book. Yes.
Yeah. So
what book do you recommend?
There's a number of there's hundreds of books on color and color theory specifically. This happens to be a painting book. It's pretty basic. It is by glasses. It's by Tami Macala, and it's very straightforward. It's sort of the overview of color theory, but it tells you about color schemes to use, and it just kind of makes it a little bit easier, not necessarily as depth in color theory. Itton's book is one of the Bibles. This is a newer, I believe he was in the 40s or 50s out of the Bauhaus movement. So he was looking at color that way. And the Bibles are this behemoth, the Chevrolet colors book that I refer to. And about interaction of color is, my favorite is Joseph Albers. This is sort of the big version of it. There is a paperback book, a version of it that is I don't know, I think it's like $20 or something. It just doesn't have, this actually has the exercises, like you can lift the paper and see what happens and whatever. But that is a lot of what I did in my course, was show that kind of way of understanding what's happening with light and the interaction of colors.
Yeah, definitely cover a lot of those exercises. And we can put some of those books in the comments of this follow-up as well. So I want to thank all three of you for your time and all of your expertise that you've shared here. Carol Shelkin, Anabella Wewer, Erin Pankratz, and you guys have been so generous and giving, and I really appreciate this extra almost hour that you've given to follow up with the questions we had from our students. So thank you again to everyone, and this will be forever at our YouTube channel. And you can subscribe to Mosaic Arts Online YouTube channel. And then if you are not already enrolled at Mosaic Arts Online, you can go there as well to enroll and check out all of our courses that we have there. So thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.